Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the late talk or late start. We were trying to account for Kyle Thompson being late. But before we get kicked off, the views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are not necessarily those of the SCV, GEC, nor any division, brigade, camps, or other subsidiaries. And we are back with our resident. Yeah. Sorry.
Kyle's on time because we were late. We did it for you, Kyle.
We did it. We did it for you. But we're back with our resident chat historian, Michael C. Hardy, who has a very interesting topic for us this evening: how to trace the history of your local area. That's something that we need to focus on because and that's kind of what we're talking about behind the stream. Is like I did that, Harrison, behind the stream instead of behind the scenes. We were talking about modern academic histories and stuff like that, how it's so hard to get something published, and how doing something as simple as messing up a bibliography could mess up your writings in the academic world, so to speak. But it's something that we need to focus on in the SCV because there are so many stories out there, local histories that we need to be preserving. So Michael, good evening, and thank you for being on with us.
Boy, it's great to be back. I have missed y'all the past 3 or 4 months. I wind up working like 3 out of 4 Monday nights in the late spring, summer, and fall. And now that it's starting to turn cold here in Western North Carolina, I am not there as much as I have been in the past. So it's really good to be back. Chatting with folks this evening, and want to say good evening to everybody out there that's watching and listening and who will watch later. It's just good to be back.
Well, we are so happy to have you back. We're glad that you and the Hardys are safe, especially with everything that happened, with Milton, not Milton, Helene, with the storms. We're glad that y'all are safe and sound. And 3 days without power is rough, but I'm glad that y'all were blessed to go by, and that was the worst thing that happened.
That was pretty much the worst thing for us. As we talked behind scenes, continue to pray for the people here in Western North Carolina and East Tennessee, because there's still a lot of people that are pretty rough. Roads that are closed, bridges out. There are still missing people. And I want to say thanks to everybody who donated to one of those relief organizations who brought in truckloads and trailer loads of material to Western North Carolina. It was really a tremendous outpouring of love and support.
Well, yeah, and still, to remind those, I know several people, at least churches. I believe our own SCV disaster relief team here in Mississippi is collecting things, as well as I know the SCV National Disaster Relief Fund. So if y'all feel inclined to continue to give, scv.org, click on the donations, and you'll see the disaster relief button on there. Especially with the end of, did you put the link in the chat?
It's loading. There it is.
Okay, and link is in the chat as well. So if I was, because we're talking about this as well, that my one research project, I've kind of hit the culmination with. And I'm still going to research that talk until I probably die, just because of how interesting it is. That's my Barksdale talk we did back in July. But another one project I've had is and for the same amount of time, is at least the war period of Rankin County, my own home county. Let's dive into it. So if somebody is wanting to really get into creating a good history of their area, how do we do that? Where do we start? What are your tips, trade secrets, and everything like that?
That's an awesome question, and I want to start with our past commander has a certain statement that he has used off and on over the years, and that statement is all history is local history. if you live in Adams County, Pennsylvania, then the Battle of Gettysburg is local history. If you're in Corinth, Mississippi, or Savannah, Georgia, even though tens of thousands of soldiers from all over the place show up in your backyard, that is still local history. And capturing it is extremely important. Getting that information out there. 9 times out of 10, no academic is going to come to your little county and dive into your local history, because it's, we live in the South, unless it's, the Klan or race riots, nobody really cares about Southern history. And that is, I found that so many true. So a lot of times when I'm traveling, one of the things I do, if I have time, as soon as I hit your county, I'm going to go to the library, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to look and see what I can find. And it's sometimes I am happily surprised. Usually I am not that surprised. It shocks me how many places that I go to have no really good resources to draw upon. And that's true even where I live. So my camp, the Colonel John B. Palmer camp, we kind of have this 3-county area that we have members from: Yancey County, Mitchell County, and Avery County, here in the mountains of western North Carolina. Yancey County has no published history, never had one. Mitchell County has a coffee table book. It's got a lot of pretty color pictures in it, but there's not a whole lot of depth in that book. And Avery County, where I live, their last history was published in 1964. It's 100 pages, has no index, no bibliography. And so it's just not really anything to grab hold on. And I personally set out a few years ago to change Avery County's history and to write in depth. And these are some of the things, some of the steps that I'm going to give you this evening are things that I have learned by trial and error. Now, I've written about several counties. I've written wartime histories of counties. And so I'm going to give you some of my experience. Y'all may have different questions or ideas, and that's fine. I look forward to those here in a few minutes. And I want to leave you with one other statement. Y'all have probably heard a statement that goes like this: think local, act local. Have y'all heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that goes into history as well. So if we think about local history and work on capturing local history, then we're actually doing something that's really, really meaningful. So I have this big, long list that I created. We should only be here 3 days. But big, long list of several ideas and things that I've discovered that works in the past. And this first part is called Where to Look. Number 1, go to your library. See if anybody has written an old county history on your county. No matter how old it may be, you may be able to find something in there that is useful. And if your county has or had a historical society, there may be newsletters that you can find stuff. Just the number one thing to this whole conversation this evening is look every place, and we'll keep coming back to that. But old county histories are a place to look. Old historical society records and newsletters are a place to look. Number 2, family histories. Now, you have to be somewhat careful with family histories, but family histories, both published, and I don't know about your library, but a lot of libraries around here have all of these great big old file folder cabinets, and they are full of family histories. And you can pull those out. I have found copies of Confederate letters and diaries and reminiscences and all kinds of stuff, but you've got to look through every single piece. I was in a library down in Burlington, North Carolina, in their North Carolina room. I'm in there by myself. I'm picking a book off the shelf. I'm looking at it. Don't see anything, putting it back. Another book, don't see anything. Oh, this book's got something. I go photocopy it, put it back in the shelf. Librarian comes in, sees what I'm doing. She's like, we don't want you to reshelve these books. And I told her, I'm going to look at every book in here. And she goes, well, please don't reshelve them. And when I left, I literally had looked at every book, and the tables were stacked 5 foot high because I had put all those books on the table. So I looked at everything. And that day I found some letters and reminiscences that nobody had ever drawn from. So that is important if you're writing regimental history or if you're writing local history. Those are huge things, especially to have untapped letters. So family histories, both published and those folders that you'll find in those filing cabinets, are great places to look. Number 3, church histories. Some churches supported the war in the 1860s. Some churches were really, really strict on not mentioning anything to do with the government. They wouldn't pray for the president. They wouldn't, mention soldiers or anything, in their church histories. But occasionally you can find some good stuff. In the county north of me, in the records of the second oldest Baptist church in the county, I found in 1863 where this Confederate soldier had come home. He was AWOL. And the church members had heard about it, and they went over to the guy's family and found him and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And the guy said, "My wife had written me this letter and said that they were in a destitute condition and that I needed to come home. And I plan to go back to the Army." And he did. He did go back to the Army. And all of that was in the church records. And so that is a fantastic story. And it's a story we often hear, wives would write their husbands that they were sick. But here I have something local. Instead of me just saying very broadly that, this happened, but I can't say it happened here. Here was a specific example in this community of this Confederate soldier. So church histories, some churches took up collections. The armies had missionaries or colporteurs who were responsible for passing out Bibles and tracts. And you will find churches that raised money for these missionaries or for the troops in the field to supply them with religious material, reading material. So that's another one of those little stories right there. Old newspapers. I would love to see a show of hands. Did your county have a newspaper during the war? Some do, some do not. You can get some great wartime stuff from those newspapers, but the post-war newspapers can be just as rich. I mean, there are just stories of the veteran reunions, of sometimes you'll find whole letter sets that were published in the 1880s and 1890s and 1900s and on in. You'll find reminiscences of, things that people experienced that they're writing later in life. So both newspapers, wartime and post-war. And you have to look more than just locally, because a lot of these soldiers, not a lot, but some of these soldiers after the war would move other places in the country for whatever reason, and they will write a reminisce, but it's not in your local newspaper. It's in a newspaper from Texas or Oklahoma or Washington or someplace. I had just finished my history of the Branch Lane Brigade, and a friend of mine from Texas shot me a note. He had found an account of the deaths of both brothers of Brigadier General James H. Lane. And he found it in a Texas newspaper. And I, in a million years, never would have looked for this account in a Texas newspaper, but he sent it to me. I had actually just submitted the manuscript, and I got a hold of my publisher and said, I need to update a couple of things here. And I was able to work the accounts. Lane had a brother die at Chancellorsville and one that died at Spotsylvania Courthouse. And I was able to work those.
That's kind of weird that, almost a year apart, almost in the same area. Sorry.
Yep. Nope. They were actually both on his staff. They were his younger brothers serving as staff officers, couriers. And I was able to work that into that manuscript. And old newspapers can take a long time to go through, but it is well worth the effort to do this. Number 5, court records. Talk about a snoozer. Court records can be a snoozer trying to go through those. But I know in some cases, some counties will vote funds for widows during the war. I know an account locally where the local court borrowed money. And when I say court, remember that counties don't have county commissioners in the 1860s. Most of the time, they are justices of the peace or magistrates who get together and form these courts of pleas and sessions that kind of serve the purpose as county commissioners. That may not be true in Mississippi, but that's true in North Carolina and some of these other places. And so it's in front of these courts that they're coming up with money and all kinds of things. One of the biggest neglected areas is post-war court records. If you live in an area, Western North Carolina, East Tennessee, North Alabama, parts of Florida, that have a strong Union contingent, these people are suing each other like crazy. I know locally there's a family, this is a Confederate family whose farm was robbed during the war. And after the war, the people that robbed them are selling their clothes. And this Confederate family is suing this Unionist family trying to get their clothes back. So,
Really?
yes, that is just court cases out the wazoo. Pardon that French there, that, are really an untapped thing going on in, 1866, 1867. And that's just a really fascinating part of that story. So court records can be a gold mine. I know a lot of courthouses were burned during the war, and those records do not survive. And sometimes they've been burned 2 or 3 times since then. If you were in trouble, Harrison, and the evidence was being stored in the courthouse, you could go burn the courthouse and destroy the evidence.
The views and opinions of our guests are also his, not necessarily ours or the SCV's.
Now, my courthouse has been burnt down multiple times. Now, why you got to throw me under the bus like that?
I'm sorry. I just needed an example, and you're sitting right there on the screen, but we still love you.
Thank you.
If any of the two would do it, it'd be him.
That's okay. So court records are good. State records. So if you're going to research your county, you need to go to your state capital and you need to dive into state records from the Adjutant General's office, the Comptroller's office, the Governor's office. There could be fantastic stuff in those records, just great stuff. And little things. You remember, it's always the little things that make up a great story. I found when I was in my state capital doing research at the archives, I found a instance where for the first couple of years, the state government is still paying the counties out of the literary fund to operate schools. But then they talk about how, the war has progressed. In 1864, we're not doing that anymore because, the money is all being diverted toward the war effort. And so that is just one of those little stories in there that most people, have never thought about. I guess a lot of people would look at that and maybe go, huh, and then pass on and keep on going. But it's still it's just part of that story. But the governor's papers can be rich with stuff. Some states have the governor's papers that are published. But even then, I would still go look in the governor's papers because they might not have published everything. So there's just some good stuff out there in those state records to find. Then we have the all except for one of these, the easy things to go and mine from. Those are the official records of the War of the Rebellion, 128 volumes published by Congress. There's a supplement to the official records that is not online. That's I think 100 volumes. I don't remember how many of those are, but there's those. There's Confederate Veteran. There's the Land We Love. There's the Southern Historical Society papers, Southern Bivouac. Almost all of those are on archive.org, and you can go there, all except the supplement to the OR. You can go there and you can look through those. You can keyword search. Not everything is going to get indexed. So those you need to look in those. If you're really lucky or blessed, you're going to find some good material in there. A lot of the mountain counties that I write about, not so much. Kind of slipped under the radar, but lots of good stuff in there. But look at every one of those. The Land We Love was done by D.H. Hill out of Charlotte, North Carolina, the Southern Historical Society papers. That's where a lot of your more high-ranking Confederate officers were hanging out, having their debates after the war about who did what. You might even want to check something like the National Tribune, because occasionally Confederates will write in, and that's more of a federal publication, a Yankee publication. But a lot of times some Confederates will contribute to that as well. So official records, Confederate veteran, all kinds of great stuff, sometimes great stuff there. Pension records. I think every state's Confederate pension records are online. I could be wrong about that. But I know North Carolina and Virginia and Florida and Alabama have all been digitized, and they are all available to research free. Unfortunately, most of the Confederate pension records are really sparse. Just not a lot of material there. It's when we get into some of the Federals that were former Confederates who crossed over the lines and joined the Federal Army, that sometimes that stuff can be rich. There in my county, William McKeeson Blaylock and his wife, Melinda or Sarah Blaylock, they're buried in the county I live in. And he was in the Confederate Army, got discharged, and then joined the Federal Army at the end of the war. Basically fought his own war in this area. Well, his federal pension record is 3 inches thick. And all of his Confederate neighbors are writing in about how all of the bad things he did during the war. So when it comes to local history, that federal pension record is pretty good stuff. Unfortunately, most of those are not online. And you're going to have to go to DC, to the National Archives to access those. But if you have a federal soldier from your county who did die during the war and his wife applied for a pension, those are on Fold 3. But the regular federal pensions are not online. I sure wish they were. Along those same lines, we have the Southern Claims Commission. So, Connor, I'll pick on you. If you were a good Union man during the war and the Union Army came by and took your 3 horses and a bunch of hay and fodder and bacon and gave you a receipt, then after the war, you could apply to the Southern Claims Commission to get reimbursed for all the stuff that the Federal Army took.
Well, if I'm a good Union man, why would I want to do that?
Well, because, they took all your horses. That's why you do it. Anyway, there's some good stuff in there. There's also a barred and disallowed. So it's people who applied and the federal government turned them down. But you had to have all of these affidavits and all of this stuff from your neighbors. Sometimes even your Confederate neighbors are writing in saying, yes, he was a good Union man during the war. So if we're doing local history, that's kind of an important part of this story. I want to include everything in this story, and that's a part of that as we dig. And once again, we're digging deep here. We're looking for absolutely any little scrap that we can find. So those are the Southern Claims Commissions. Something I just found the other day that has been digitized or it's in the process are the Freedmen's Bureau records. After or toward the end of the war, the federal government set up the Freedmen's Bureau, and they were responsible for schools and to make sure that all these recently freed slaves were getting, paid for the jobs they were doing. And that has now been, I can't say all of it's digitized, but a lot of it. But there are, if you're looking in that 1866, 67, 68 time period, there's actually some decent stuff in there. There was a local case I was following, and the federal officer who signed off on it has the same initials as a local Confederate soldier. And this Confederate soldier was a lieutenant in the 16th North Carolina, but when that company reorganized in 62, he got voted out. I can't find him in another Confederate regiment. I thought, well, maybe this is the same guy. Everything I can find says that the Confederate officer died in 1873, and this federal officer with the same name, or at least initials, doesn't apply for his federal pension until 1885. So I was able, I followed that trail for, a good couple of hours looking at different stuff, trying to get something, and it never worked out. But the Freedmen's Bureau records, interesting stuff there, but it has been digitized as well. How many folks, I can't see anybody's hands, how many folks had a United Confederate Veterans camp in their county? If you don't know that, volume 9 of the published bound Confederate Veteran in issue number 8 has a list of almost all of the United Confederate Veteran camps that were ever established. Not all, I'm not aware of any place that has a all list, but this is one of the most complete lists that I have ever seen. And, it runs from Alabama, through whatever, Texas, Tennessee, West Virginia, Washington, D.C. Did you know there were UCV camps in Washington, D.C.? There were UCV camps in New York, too.
Yeah. I was about to say Archibald Gracie, who died, well, he died as a result of the Titanic. But he was a member of the SCV and had folks in a UCV camp in New York City.
Yep. That UCV camp in New York City was founded in the parlor of a veteran from the 39th Battalion, Virginia Cavalry, who became a pastor. We don't remember which church in New York City. And that camp was founded in his living room after the war. So, but United Confederate Veterans, your local newspapers may have, United Confederate Veterans records in them when they met, their reunions, who they sent to state reunion, who they sent to national reunions. Your state archives may have some of those records. The biggest collection of United Confederate Veteran records are at Louisiana State University. I actually wrote them a couple of years ago and asked them for the membership. I asked for any information that you have on our local UCV camp. It was the Pender camp. I paid, I don't remember, it was cheap, 10 or 15 bucks. And they sent back a dozen scanned pages of the rosters of my UCV camp. Strangely enough, when my camp, local UCV camp, was originally created, they only let members of the 16th North Carolina in it. If you were in one of our other local Confederate companies, you couldn't join that camp. And then later they expanded and let members of the 29th North Carolina, the 58th North Carolina into that organization. And I saw a note go by. Jason was asking Confederate Veterans Digital. There are a couple of different places. I believe are they on our website?
They are. I think it's maybe under the membership tab.
They are also on archive.org.
Yeah. If you click under, let me see. Yeah. I think it's going to be under, like you have to log in because you're supposed to also be able to see the current issues. I haven't logged in a while. No, if you go under resources and click Confederate Veteran Magazine, it then takes you to the login page. So yeah, you do have to log in to view it, but they are available under there because doing research, at least on the Mississippi Division years ago, I found in the 1884, one veteran from the Tupelo area wrote in, to the veterans saying that the sons had started meeting independently, which is the earliest record I could find of the sons organizing in Mississippi. So there was that.
Contact LSU, their archives, and they were great to work with, and went by really quick. I mean, I think in a couple of days they had scanned the pages that I wanted and had dropped them into Dropbox, and I was able to print those out. And so I had whatever records that they had on my local UCV camp. So that's a fantastic resource. If you're able to pair that up with whatever local records you can find with the records that you get from LSU, that can tell you a little bit about your local UCV camp. I see where David Pope says they charge about $20 for a roster. That's not bad. Whole lot cheaper than me driving to Baton Rouge.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and just really quickly, one thing that I was in 2013 when I joined the Masonic Lodge in Decatur, I was appointed as lodge archivist. I think I'm still lodge archivist. But we're lucky. And just like courthouses, were burnt. Our lodge was eventually burnt in '64 when Sherman came through. But before they torched the lodge, they were able to pull out all of the meeting books. So that was our local history, saved within that. Now, I don't know how receptive your lodges will be if you're not a member, but I'm sure there's a member in your camp who could probably get some access information for you. But we also had, going all the way back to 48, the Masonic records for the entire state of Mississippi. Every Grand Lodge prints a book every year that has, and it's about as thick as this, one of these books. But it has the names of the Masons, what the Grand Lodge has done. And I remember reading the 1865, because I didn't think we'd have that far back, and they were just all kind of piled in a corner somewhere. So I pulled the 1865 one out, and what the Grand Lodge wrote and did for as far as the dispensation of Masons who were raised during the war, how they were to be treated, the funds that were raised in those lodges, military lodges, as well as funds dispersed to distressed Masons in Reconstruction. That was another good local bit of history that's a little bit harder to get to, but I'm sure you have a contact within your camp or somebody you may go to church with that may could help you out with that.
Yep. Once again, look every place. 3 things left on my list. Number 12, I have actually been numbering as we've gone along, but number 12, the 1890 Veteran Census and the 1910 Census. The 1910 Census has a column, are you a U.S. or a CS vet? And that's not a lot of information on there. But if you're trying to research a name and you're not sure, especially if he was, 14 or 15 going into the Army the last, 3 or 4 months of the war, that may be something to go on there. The 1890 Veteran Census was only supposed to be for Union soldiers. I know in my census, they wrote Confederate names too, and they went back through and crossed them out, but you can still read it. So once again, trying to prove if somebody was a Confederate or a Union soldier, what side they were on, that 1890 or 1910 Veteran Census. I will also, those are 2 good primary resources. I have also a number 12, Find a Grave and Ancestry, but be careful with those, because anybody can go in and edit Find a Grave or Ancestry, and not everything they write is correct. They may think it is, but you have to back up a second and think logically about this. I know on Ancestry, somebody has my great grandfather still being alive and remarried 30 years after he died. because I got his death certificate. I know that's not true, but and Ancestry can be good. For years, I looked for a picture of Colonel Charles C. Lee. I knew one existed because the United Confederate Veterans in Charlotte had a hall where they met regularly, and they talk about all the portraits that they have around the room. And Colonel Charles C. Lee of the 37th North Carolina, who was killed during the 7 days in 1862, they talk about his portrait being in there. I could never find that picture. I found it on Ancestry, and the guy said that it was his great grandfather, great great grandfather. So it's not something he found online and then posted on Ancestry. His dad had the actual image and had posted it. And I'd looked for that picture like 20 years. I mean, just trying to find it. So there's good stuff on Ancestry. Just be careful.
Yeah, and you got to, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was doing some, Ancestry had like a join now and, get half a year for half price or some promotion. So I, joined under another email and copied all the stuff from our other tree and everything like that. And I found some stuff on my Ancestor that I hadn't, didn't know before. Maybe I found an Ancestor I'd never, found before. But the profile that I got it from was, it's like identify all slavers or something like that. So you got to be careful with, what you're sharing on Ancestry, because, while we're trying to do it for laudable reasons, there are those out there that are trying to, hurt our history as well.
Yep, exactly. And that's one part, you have to be vigilant in what you are doing. Google Books and archive.org are two great places. Archive.org has gone through and digitized tons of old books. And if you are patient with your research, you can find stuff. You can find stuff that you never would have found otherwise. When I was working on my book on Charlotte, North Carolina and the war, I went through archive.org. I would type in, Mecklenburg County 1861, Mecklenburg County 1862, 63, all the way through, just seeing what I could find. And I found this great story of these Union officers. It's February of 1865. The federal prison in Florence, South Carolina is closed. And they have shipped these federal officers to Charlotte. They don't have a prison. They've just got this big, large open field that they put them in, and a couple of guards around them. And these two or three federal officers decide, hey, let's desert. Let's escape, not desert. Let's escape. And so they went up to the guard and they said, hey, we need to go to the latrine. Guard says, go right ahead. Well, they kept on going. And they're wandering around in Western North Carolina for a couple of weeks. It's February 1865. It's cold. They're hungry. They ran into somebody who says, all those other federal officers that you were in prison with, they sent them via train to Goldsboro, North Carolina, put them on a boat and paroled them and sent them up north. And these guys turn around, spend a week wandering back through Western North Carolina, get to Charlotte. They are put on a train. They are sent to Goldsboro, paroled, put on a boat, and sent up north. So they had this 3-week adventure that they didn't need to take. If they'd have just stayed where they were, they would have been home a whole lot sooner, but they had the grand idea of escaping. I never would have found that account without archive.org, because I never would have went to this little library in Michigan that had this account, and looked for that. That just never was, in my research budget and time constraints. So if you're diligent, you can find stuff on archive.org. Google Books, and there are 3 or 4 other places that have online books that have been scanned. Google Books, a lot of times, will be some newer stuff. It can be frustrating because it only gives you a little bit of the source, but at least you know to go out there and look for it and try and track it down. So they're really, really good stuff there. And my last point in this where to look category is probably where everybody starts first. Harrison, where does everybody start first?
I don't know if you were like me, but I started first in the libraries. I didn't even go online.
Most people start first on Google.
Oh, well, I guess I'm a bit old fashioned.
Well, I am too. But the vast majority of people will start on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of the things I mentioned tonight, you can access on the internet. The Southern Claims Commission, the Freedmen's Bureau, the 1890 Veteran Census, those books on archive.org, the official records of the War of the Rebellion, the Confederate Veteran, all of that is online. But so many times people just go to their internet browser and type in what they're looking for, and the AI will give you the top 3 or 4 things, and you think that's it. You've got to dig a whole lot deeper than what you find on the internet. You really, really, really do. And I shy away from stuff that I find on somebody's website. Unless it's documented, unless there are sources that I can go check that out, I do not use that material. Because I don't want to share bad history. Now, if you have a page out there, I'm not saying that you share bad history. I need a little bit more to go on. Those are my 14 things. I have a couple other things to add to that. And I had this first, but I moved it down here later in my list. And we talked about this before we went live. You have to document everything.
Yes.
Every single little piece. Now, when I started writing 30 years ago, I had spiral notebooks, and I would go someplace and I would take notes and I'd make photocopies. And I have all of those over there on a shelf someplace. Now I do all my note taking on a computer. It's keyword searchable. But I have every source of where I find every little piece. If you're going to be serious and be taken seriously in the writing world, you have to do that. That is the simplest, and it's not hard to do. It's really not. You don't have to have a doctorate to get good documentation. You just have to be diligent about doing that. So document everything. Also, talk to people. Let them know what you're working on. I know in one of the regimentals that I wrote, I went to the local radio station. I had posters up at the local museum. I was interviewed in the newspaper. I did all of this stuff. The only thing I didn't do was to sit down with the phone book and call everybody in the phone book. And even after me telling people I was working on this for a couple of years, when it came out, I had a lady show up with a handful of letters and said, "Oh, I wish I'd have known you were working on this." And I'm like, I just can't do anything else but talk to people. Because somebody may know somebody who has that information, and they don't know what to do with it, or it's their family story, or they got these letters, and you just have to get out and talk to people. Along those same lines, when you get done with whatever project, we're going to talk about that here in a second as well, get somebody else to read it. Get somebody who's knowledgeable. Your mom does not count.
Right.
I would not give my material to my mom to read, for a critical look. So get somebody who's knowledgeable about at least the time period that you're writing about, but and have them give you a critical look at it. Because there may be things that you think that everybody knows that you skip over that you really kind of need to explain and help people out. And so get somebody else to look at it. 2, 3 other things, and I'll be done. Spreadsheet. I took the 1860 census in the counties that I've been working on, and I created a spreadsheet. I put every male between the ages of 10 and 55 on that spreadsheet. If your census, 1860 census, is divided up into districts, I left them there. I put their age, their occupation, their value of personal and real property, when they enlisted, when they died, when they deserted, when they returned, who went federal, where they're buried. I put all of that on this spreadsheet. And then I started to look for trends. What group of people deserted at the same time? Who went federal at the same time? And what's their socioeconomic background? That whole idea that it was a rich man's war, poor man's fight, that's not true. In fact, it's a lot of time, it's the rich people in the community, it's their sons that are the first to enlist and start forming these companies. But I have documentation to show that. What to do with this information? I write books. Actually, I do a lot of these things, but you can put it in a book format. You can create a blog. You can go to Blogger and set one up, and it's free. And you're getting that information out there for people. You can start a Facebook page. That's free. You may occasionally have to argue with people, but that's free. You can write a column for your local newspaper. You can start a YouTube channel. You can start a YouTube channel for free. You can do any of those, just trying to get that information out there. That is vital to what we do, because if I have all of these 3-ring binders behind me full of information and I never do anything with it, then when I die, whoever comes along will probably chunk most of it in the trash, because a lot of people just don't value that type of information, or it's overwhelming. That's probably been my thing. It'll be overwhelming. But figure out some place to do it. A blog you can set up for free. A Facebook page you can set up for free. Talk to your local newspaper about writing a column. Just whatever means that you are comfortable with getting that information out there. Go for it. Lastly, going back to our former commander-in-chief who said all history is local history. And that's very true. But I've got my own statement. We have got to be the masters of all of our history, not just the 1860s. We've got to dive back to early settlement. We've got to talk about World War II and civil defense and all of this stuff, because either it's not getting done or people are telling our stories with a skewed point of view. I try and be honest with the stories that I tell. And, sometimes that offends people, that, it's not quite the way that they envisioned it, but that's what the historical record says. And so I try and be impartial and honest. But we have got to be the masters of all of our history.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, it doesn't get done.
Yeah. I mean, so, today obviously is Veterans Day, Armistice Day with the end of World War I. We have no more World War I veterans. We're about to have, no more World War II veterans. Yep. But, you think about how many people forget about their Confederate ancestry. Well, people are forgetting about their World War I ancestry. I'm lucky enough to have a picture of my great-grandfather in his Marine uniform. I was able to go, and the state of Mississippi during the centennial put up all the service records that they had for World War I soldiers in Mississippi. They've since removed it off their website, but I could still go on Fold 3 and find that. But that is a huge portion of our history, because that was such a turning point and defining moment internationally. We abandoned the Monroe Doctrine and started getting involved in global affairs, and everything that led up to World War I, as far as all the different sociological and economic things that led to it. Should we be involved? Should we not be involved? All that is a huge point of history that I'm starting to get interested in, that early 1900s.
So this morning
portion.
from Veterans Day, I share this post every year. We have a soldier from my county that I live in who died. He was killed about 6:30 in the morning on November 11th.
Hmm.
And he's one of those ones that just so close, about 3 hours, 4 hours later, and he would have survived the war. And one of his commanding officers wrote a letter home telling about his death. They eventually brought his remains back, and he's buried in a local cemetery. Well, I'm grateful for all of the veterans, but I want Jesse Statton's story to be remembered because he was killed. That corporal was killed that morning on that charge that did not need to take place. And so, and you may have people like that in your county as well. You probably do.
Yeah, just the one thing that I found, just personal vindication, looking at, going back to great granddaddy, was the story was that my grandmother was named Lorraine because he was stationed for a province in that province of France. Or that for a period in that province in France, and he said it was the most beautiful country, and she was the most beautiful baby, and of course, yeah, whatever. Well, I pull service records, and sure enough, there it is. But how many other stories like that are there? And how many stories can you vindicate with that? When I was outside stirring my chili, did you happen to mention anything about the WPA files?
Not a whole lot. Most of the WPA files are like 1930, early 1940s, and most of the vets are gone by then.
Right.
But there are some slave narratives in the WPA files that are interesting, and a few first-person accounts. And maybe it's richer where you are than where it is where I am in the counties that I research.
When I was doing my research on Rankin County, just going through the works progress stuff, I actually found where they found a list from a general store in Rankin County of prices of stuff in 1863.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to actually look at how much a barrel of flour is, how much catfish is. Stuff like that, and then buffalo fish, which is catfish. But I was like, okay, well that goes to what the economy was like in Rankin County, Mississippi during that period. And also I found a couple of firsthand accounts from girls who were children. Right. Now, of course, child memories and stuff like that. And of course, they're adults. By this point, of when the Federals came through and sacked Brandon in February of '64.
Right.
So, I believe one woman said, they entered mother's pantry, they took all of her jams, jellies, and when we didn't even have a rooster to, warn us of the morning dawn or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, your WPA files are richer than mine.
I think I just got lucky because which I prefer microfiche to microfilm. But yeah, I got lucky on those.
So I saw where C.W. Johnson asked about RootsWeb. I don't think RootsWeb. I think it's archived. I don't think it's active anymore. When I wrote my very first book 30 years ago, every family had a RootsWeb page. And I actually took every single soldier out of that regiment and said, this is what I'm working on. If you're looking I'm looking for information. If you've got letters or diaries or photographs, I'd love to hear from you. I am happy to share what I know about his service record. And I got a pretty good response out of that and collected several things that were not in archives or, state archives or college archives, university archives, or any place. But I don't know if RootsWeb is still a real viable place to do that type of research. There's probably some good stuff archived there. I think they got bought out and kind of got shelved.
Did you mention newspaper.com?
Yeah, newspaper.com, the Library of Congress. I use newspaper.com all the time. The Library of Congress has got great resources, newspaper resources. Your state may have a good newspaper database that is free. North Carolina does. Virginia seems to be a little weak. Tennessee's okay. But you just have to play around with the various states and see what you can find. But I do use newspapers.com and the Library of Congress one as well. Just type in LOC newspapers and it will pull it up.
And David Pope says Chronicling America.
That's Library of Congress.
Yeah. I use newspaper.com is actually, I found the actual newspaper because I'm thinking about my Barksdale talk for tomorrow night. The story of Barksdale and Davis getting to the slap fight, I knew it was from a newspaper because I found it was Civil War Talk Forum. But then I actually went back and I found the newspaper that it came from, the date, all that stuff.
Right.
So that's a good source.
Yep, a lot of good sources, and just dig around. A lot of university archives have started to digitize stuff, and so you can find letters and things that way. You just have, once again, you just have to be patient and make sure you write down where it came from, because we're all guilty of occasionally. I'm guilty of finding something 25 years ago, and I wish I knew where I had found it now because I could use it, but I have no idea. I remember seeing it, but
well, luckily everything when I was hitting heavy the county history project my senior year of high school, I'm lucky that Rankin County had the in 1940 or 1984 and then in 88 our historical society, County Historical Society, put out a 2-volume set, volume 1 in 84 and volume 2 in 88 of the history of Rankin County. And our historical society was very proactive in turning stuff into the state archives. And we actually have vertical files, which even the Mississippi College Rifles SCV camp has a vertical file because one of the guys who worked at the archives got our newsletter and would put that newsletter in the file for us. Mm-hmm. So we were very, very blessed to have that. But again, our historical society would turn everything into the state, and they just, I think it was 3 folders of Rankin County I ended up going through.
Yep. Good stuff.
And whenever I would pull a book or something like that, I immediately, when I would get the copies made, I would say, I want a copy of the title page. I want a copy of the behind the title page where it has all the, I can't remember the actual name of it, but it has the copyright. I guess it is the copyright page. All that, as well as like I need page 5, 7, yada, 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 and I would staple it together. So it's all, packed into one, okay, so if I need to go and look through, what do I pull from the Rankin County history book? Pull it, and then there's everything. Because I was writing a term paper, it wasn't even a term paper; it was a full year project paper. But I had to source it.
I will say this: lately, especially post-COVID, libraries are really not letting you make a lot of photocopies anymore. At least the ones that I work with, like the Southern Historical Collection or Duke or even the National Archives. I was there back in June. So I actually have a little camera that I carry around with me that I use to image all of this stuff with.
Okay.
And just be ready for that if you go to some archive or university someplace that they may shy away from you or them making a lot of photocopies.
Yeah. And if you got an iPhone, there's the scanner capability.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind. I saw one other question up here. Jason asked, how long did I spend at the archives at the old Museum of the Confederacy writing regimentals? I've been, of course, to the Museum of the Confederacy doing research. I spoke there right before they closed. and the battlefields, and the Southern Historical Collection, and Duke University, and Emory in Atlanta, and Auburn University, and all these places doing research over time. But if I can order the documents, you have to look at the time cost analysis. If the file is not too big, if it's 30 pages of letters, and they'll let me order it, even if I spend $50, I can't drive to DC. I can't even drive to Raleigh. It costs me $100 a day to go to Raleigh. By the time I pay for gas, and to pay to park, and to pay for whatever copies, I don't copy much anymore. And go out to eat on the way home, I've spent $100. And so it's you really have to examine that cost. But sometimes you need to go because you flip through and find stuff that may be surprising, or you go and talk to one of the archivists at there, and they may have other ideas that you never thought of. I'm working on this, and I got this and this, and they said, well, and I had this recently. I said, well, have you looked in this folder? That's how I found the literary society and the school thing, the money going back to the schools. I never would have thought to have looked in there. But I was able to add a little bit to my story by looking at those sources. So if I have to go to the library, and I go to a lot of libraries, in fact, I'm going to stop at the library in Roanoke on the way home Wednesday morning from my trip. That's just part of it. But if you can find stuff online, that saves money in the long run.
Well, good deal. Well,
And let me say this: if you need help and want help, drop me an email. I think Harrison's going to throw my email up on the screen really quick. I'd be happy to try and help you any way that I can. Or message me on Facebook, or you can go to my website, michaelchardy.com. There's a contact form on there, but shoot me an email. I would love to try and help you in this process. I by no means know it all, but I've been around the block a couple of times, and would love to try and help.
You still working to preserve the North Carolina Grays flag?
They got that done.
Good.
The Yadkin Grays flag. Yadkin Grays.
I'm just scrolling through the blog really quickly.
Yep, they got that done, and it was a silk flag, and it cost a lot of money. I mean, I want to say that was $35,000 for that flag. But they raised that funds, and they got that one done. But yeah, there's my email address. If I can ever help, drop me a note, and we'll see what we can do.
And I'm also putting the blog on here, so make sure to follow Michael's blog, michaelchardy.blogspot.com. It's there in the chat as well. Bunch of great history in there. Really, it's been a while since I've had a chance to go and look. And I'm probably going to steal a couple of articles for the next MOS&B newsletter. So get ready for that.
Jason wants to know when we can order Feeding the A&V. I have a date of March 19th of next year for a release date, but I will probably not do any orders until about a month out before that, just to make sure that date actually holds.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. I remember when you came on and talked about it. So for guys that are interested, Michael does have a very interesting article on here about the UCV reunions in Memphis.
Ooh.
I did a whole series on Memphis earlier this year. I just, there was not a lot of information out there about Memphis in the war, and I wrote 5 or 6 posts about Memphis and that time period, and then one after the war about the UCV camps. And I actually have found another Memphis post I want to write, the wartime newspaper in Memphis. actually moved around to like 5 or 6 different towns during the war, but continued publication. After Memphis fell to the Union in 1862, I think it's the Memphis Avalanche, but don't quote me on that part. Or maybe it's the Memphis Appeal, actually moved around to a bunch. They were in Chattanooga, they were in Atlanta, I think they were in Macon. And so I'm going to add to that series that I did sometime in the near future. My blogging has been a little behind with all of the storm stuff lately. Just out doing community stuff and not so much down here.
Well, yeah, it's and my thing on it, at least being interested in Memphis, is Mississippi has 2 large cities, Memphis and New Orleans. So I really loved that city until they went, crazy. Yep. But anyway, we appreciate you. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Sure.
We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Harrison is not going to be on Thursday because he has a camp meeting. Hey, you have a camp meeting Thursday, right, Harrison?
I know I do, but for some reason, I always forget. So we're going to talk with GCB, talk with the Florida man, see who can host Thursday. GCB saying he's not it. So, Sean, if you're watching, that means you're it. So make sure to check the SCV Chat Facebook page and website for an update on look around the Confederation. I'll try to have a for real update by y'all Wednesday. But go ahead and send in your news anyway. We like to make posts on our social media about the news and then on that week's episode of Look Around the Confederation. So still send that in at 7 p.m. Confederate Standard Time, hopefully, and email scvyouthOutreach@gmail.com.
It's daylight time, not standard anymore. Also, remember tomorrow that we have Look Around Florida with Sean McFall on Sean's channel and on this channel, I think. So make sure to tune in for that. On Sundays, remember to tune into Michael's History Chat. Search him up on Facebook and get into
Sunday Night History Live.
He graciously agreed to skip last night so he could be on for tonight, and we appreciate that. Next Monday, we will, if you remember this past Monday, we started with the episode that the Abbeville Institute did on the Confederate Constitution. We stopped halfway through, and we still got to get Donald Livingston's portion of the video done. So we'll be starting with that next week, and then we're getting close to Christmas and everything like that. Make sure that you're following the Stars and Bars Studios page, because there may be an episode similar to what we did last Tuesday come up in the near future. Who knows?
Not to mention, you might want to join our Patreon to see some pretty cool stuff coming your way soon.
Yeah, I need to write another blog post for our Patreon.
As well as finally maybe another episode of the Moosehead Book Club.
Hey, I've just been waiting for your schedule to...
Yeah, it's going to lighten up soon, hopefully, please.
Which we've got to...
got to actually reread it.
At this point, I have to reread the portion that we're covering, or portions of Albion Sea that we're covering. I've got. Go ahead.
I'm probably going to tell everybody the first episode of every book, or not every book, but the first episode was free, so it is on our podcast. You can go to SCV Chat, hit episodes, you'll see the podcast. Listen to that, catch up, get a refresher, because that's what I will be doing. And we'll read that book sometime before hopefully we go on our.
We just got to reread the portions about families and naming ways, which I'm pretty sure I've got tucked back here in the semi-eidetic memory. I just got to refresh everything. But
I
waiting.
have to reread the whole chapter.
Yeah, well,
I don't have that memory.
It's not chapters; it's sections.
Oh,
Because he doesn't break it into chapters. But anyway, we're gonna call it an episode here. Michael, again, appreciate you for being on. Appreciate everybody for watching. Remember to think locally, act locally, and history is local too.
Yep.
We will be back next Monday. Moose, in the words of the late and great Harold Philpott, no Fumar in the elevator.
All right, he's gone.
Awesome.
So
I had to go stir that chili.
Yeah, we're just going to end the stream. All right, everybody, you have a great night, and no Fumarin.